Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you all are doing well, and I'm hoping that my voice is quite clearly audible to you guys. Okay, so this is me, Aisha Zahid, your science teacher, and today I welcome you all in this session where we'll be discussing our upcoming topic of our new ongoing chapter for the grade 8. Okay, so let's get started. This is the front page of your science book, which is General Science for Grade 8, and this book has been published by Cantab. Okay, so the chapter that is ongoing in our school, in the class, its sources and the effect of heat energy. We have discussed the concept of the heat, its effect, the sources of heat, and then we have discussed about the thermal expansion and contraction. Today we'll be discussing further more examples and the further more phenomena related to thermal expansion and contraction. Okay, so this is your chapter. It's on page number 110, and the topic today we are going to discuss is on page number 114, the effects of thermal expansion and contraction of solids. First of all, I wanted to make the concept of thermal expansion and contraction very much clear. The word, what does the word thermal means? Whenever you guys heard the word thermal, the thermal word, the term means heat. Whenever the term thermal will come, whether in a sentence or whether in a statement or whether sort of a word, it means heat, something which is related to heat. Now, thermal expansion. What is the meaning of expansion? Expansion means the phenomena of expanding something, right? Thermal expansion means the expanding of something due to heat. Like the heat is involved in the expansion of something, whether it's about the expansion of solid, it's about the expansion of liquid, or it's about the expansion of gas, right? And what does the meaning of contraction is? Contraction is basically is like the resemblance with the term squeezing something. Okay, so contraction means squeezing, or the distance between the particles are becoming less, the decrease in the size and the decrease in the space and the distance between the particles is known as contraction. Okay, so let's get started. Thermal expansion and contraction of solids inconveniences us in different ways. In our life, we usually have seen the examples of thermal expansion and contraction in solids, but we have not noticed them in such a way, but they are a source of inconvenience for us in our daily life. It can be dangerous or and frustrating as well. The thermal expansion and contraction can be very much dangerous and frustrating in such ways that we'll be discussing forward. But we have overcome these challenges by applying our intellect. Like we have cope up all these problems and all these difficulties by our intellect. Like the scientists and all the people, like the physicians, have used their minds and their intellects to cope up with all these difficulties and problems. Clear? Okay, so following are the ways in which thermal expansion affects our construction and how we prevent them. Like how thermal expansion is affecting our construction area. First of all, I wanted to make a question here with you guys. Here is a picture for that. Like whenever an architect is used are designing a building, or when the workers are constructing a building, you guys must have noticed that they used to place all the blocks very nearly, right? I wanted to make a question here. Have you ever have you ever noticed that why a building is not cracked by the source of heat? Like for example, I will clear it. For example, when we used to provide heat to any solid, ठीक है, when you used to provide heat to any solid, that solid will expand, right? When an iron is heated, or when like the sugar crystals are heated, they usually expands and then changes their matter state and changes into liquid, right? Your buildings, your hotels, yeah, like all the architectural areas, all the architectural structures are in the solid state. Our city and our country has faced severe global warming this year, right? We have faced a temperature above than 40 and 45 degrees Celsius, and that was not really much healthy for the humans and even for the matters as well. So why we don't have heard that due to the high temperature a particular building or the part of a particular building has been damaged, yeah, has been broken down? Why we haven't heard that thing? It should be because due to the temperature the solid material usually melts. But why our buildings and why the architectural structures do not melt? The reason behind that is, usually what happens, the workers and the architectures use a space between the bricks. They usually have to maintain a space between the bricks that are placing, ठीक है? Why? The reason behind that is कि whenever there is a rise in temperature, whenever there is the high temperature, the bricks used to expand themselves, and that expansion will cause a crack and will cause damage in the building. So there, if there would be a space between them, it will not be damaged, it will not crack. Clear? So this is an intellectual idea. This, by using this intellect, architecture used to maintain a space between by placing the two bricks together. By this method and by this idea, we prevent the damaging and the cracking of the buildings, like the structures that are in the solid forms, right? Getting back to our topic, which is the effect of thermal expansion and contraction. The first topic is bending of pipelines. Now, what is the bending of pipelines? Water and gas pipelines are made bend so that they do not crack upon expansion due to heating or upon contracting due to cooling. Basically, what happens is the workers and the people have just suggested an idea that the pipelines, whether the water pipelines or the gas pipelines, should be constructed in such a way that they are bented so that they will prevent the damaging and the cracking of the pipes. Usually what happens in summers, when there is a high rise in temperature, the water pipes and the gas pipes usually damage and they burst, right? So to prevent that bursting, to prevent that damaging, usually the construction of these pipes are made in such a way that they are bented so that the cracking and the damaging and the bursting of the pipes are prevented. Clear? So the first idea that is used to prevent thermal expansion's effect is the bending of pipelines. By bending these pipelines, we will prevent the like cracking and the bursting of the pipes. Clear? Okay. And even in the winters, when there is a low temperature, our pipes usually contracts. We will discuss it later, but I would like to mention it here. Okay, not only in summers there is an effect on the size and on the length of the pipe, but in winters as well, the pipes and the materials are also affected. The second topic is damage in railway tracks. Now, the same question goes with the railway tracks as well. The the metal tracks of the railways are placed in such a way that if there is a rise in temperature, it will also cause any cracking and damaging of the tracks, and ultimately it will cause damage to the train. So the gaps are left between the segments of the metal railway tracks to allow for expansion. This is because tracks with no gaps deform due to thermal expansion in summers. The same answer will go towards the concept of railway tracks as well, that the gaps are left between the segments of a track. Like you have noticed the different tracks or different lines in the track na, just like a ladder there are different steps. So in railway track there are different segments, so the gaps are made between the segments so that they there will be the prevention for the expansion. Clear? If there will be no gaps between the segments of the railway track, what will happen? The tracks will be deformed, the tracks will be cracked, the tracks will start damaging, and ultimately it will cause the damage to the train, the railway, and ultimately it will cause the damage to the human life. Clear? Okay. The heading is about, the topic is about the destruction of roads and bridges. Just like the example of a building and a railway track, even though roads and bridges are also constructed in such a way that there is a gap between the metals and the concrete slabs, so that uh, the cracking and the bursting and the damaging of the roads and the bridges has made been prevented, right? So moving towards the next page, which is 115, overhead power and telephone lines. Okay, I wanted to make one thing very much clear, that whenever you pour a boiling water in a glass, like for example you have boiled a water will always boil on 100 degrees celsius and above 100 degrees celsius, not below than that. So whenever the temperature of water reaches to 100 degrees celsius, what will happen? It will start boiling, and when you pour the hot boiling water into a glass, what will happen? It will crack. Why? Just because the glass is a poor conductor of heat, it will not resist against the heat and it will crack. Clear? So this is also an example of thermal expansion. Like due to the heat, due to the expansion, the molecules of the glass expands, they separated, the distance between them becomes larger, and what will happen? It will cause the cracking of the glass. Clear? Okay. So returning towards the topic, which is overhead powers and telephone lines, the same in the case with overhead telephone lines and main power lines between the poles. Now you have noticed that the telephone lines and the overhead power lines are constructed in such a way that the lines are between the two poles, right? You can also see in the picture as well that there are the poles, and there are some sort of wires between these poles, right? So basically these wires are placed between the poles just to prevent the cracking, to prevent the damaging of these overhead power lines and telephone lines. Clear? So the basic concept to prevent the contraction, the expansion, the basic concept of preventing the thermal expansion is like you have to maintain some of the distances between whether the metals, whether the slabs, whether uh, the railway tracks, whether the bricks. By maintaining some of the distances, the matters and the metals will expand themselves, ultimately will not damage them, ultimately will prevent it from damaging, from cracking, from bursting, from everything, from every destruction, right? So now I would like to also add some of the concept of contraction. What basically contraction is? Contraction is when there is a low temperature, when there is not a rise in temperature, when there is a low temperature, decrease in temperature, the particles of the matter, whether the solid, liquid or gases, the size between these particles decreases, which will ultimately decreases the length and the size of the matter. Like take the example of the water pipe. In winters, usually the pipes contract themselves and like become the size of the original size of the same size, right? This phenomena is called as contraction. I would like to share some of the pictures, like look at this. There is a candle and a person is holding a pipette in his or her hand. Upon heating that metal pipe, what will happen? It will just expand this metal, right? It will simply expand this metal, and the length and the size of this stick will increase automatically just by providing it heat. This phenomena is known as thermal expansion. Clear? This is an image where there is a concept of thermal contraction and thermal expansion. Just look at, first of all, we'll discuss about the thermal contraction. Like when there is an ice cube, the molecules of the ice cubes are closer to each other. The space between them is like less, the decreased, ठीक है, and there is no vibration. That is why the shape is like little bit smaller. On the other hand, when we talk about the thermal expansion, like what is happening, the space between these molecules is larger, which is causing vibration and a great motion between these particles. And what will happening, it will making these particles warmer, and ultimately it results in the expansion of that particular material, whether it's solid, whether it's liquid, whether it's gas. Okay, so in thermal contraction, what is happening, the size of that matter is decreasing, and in thermal expansion, uh, due to the provide like while we are providing the heat, what is happening, the size of that particular matter is increasing, right? This was the example of the bending of pipe, usually to prevent the cracking and damaging of the pipelines, whether the water pipelines or whether the gas pipelines. This is an idea which the people have used their intellectuals, their intellect, just to prevent the thermal expansion in our daily life. Clear? I think I am very much clear now about my words and about the concepts that we have been discussing up till so far. If you are having any question and any query regarding the examples or regarding any concept, just write it down and we will discuss in the class and we will figure that out clearly. Okay, so this was an example of the bricks, the buildings. Like usually the workers use the distance, used to place a distance between the bricks, so that when the heat is provided to these bricks, uh, if they expand, it will not cause any damage and cracking to the building, right? Okay, so up till now, what you guys have to do, you guys have to read these topics, you have to mark the difficult terms and the difficult concepts that you are not able to understand up till now. We will discuss this in the class, ठीक है? and you are having any question and any query in your minds regarding this topic, you can also ask them. And if you are having any further more examples regarding thermal expansion and thermal contraction, it would be great, we will discuss in the class as well. So what you guys have to do, you guys have to find further more examples regarding thermal expansion and thermal contraction, uh, like in our surrounding, which are in our daily life, we will discuss in the class. Clear? So till then, take care, start doing your work, and thank you so much for giving me your time for listening all the lecture. Take care, Allah Hafiz, and thank you.